Just say the boys. The boys.
Hey, man.
What's up, everybody? We are back.
We're back with
for
a
the
brand new edition.
Second week in a row.
Yeah, pretty crazy, man.
Consistency.
We are creating new habits over here. New year,
New year, new us.
new us, man. We are changed.
This is driving me nuts. Okay. What are we talking about today?
We're just jumping right
First
in.
of all, first things first. It hasn't actually been a week for us.
It's true.
But how are you doing?
I feel like I'm doing pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I've been over the last probably 3 or 4 months, I've been in a great spot.
Why?
Consistently. I don't know, man. Jesus just been good to me in this season. So I think that there's one thing I like still struggle with, like what we were talking about last episode of I crave adventure, especially after watching The Hobbit. Now then I'm like, I just want to go all over the world and slay a troll.
Kill a dragon.
But other than that, I mean, I think that that's like a sin I'm pretty like used to fighting. So, but other than that, man, I feel like I've had a good
fight
spot.
it.
I think being thankful is probably how I fight it most. Yeah. Like I usually get most discontent when I don't see what's around me, where God's put me and what he's put around me.
That's good.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
We're just going to stop it right there. That's a good
All right,
lesson.
guys. Been good.
Yeah. Good catching up on this Wednesday afternoon.
But yeah, so that's where I've been. How about you, man?
I've been good. I'm tired. It's Wednesday at 4. So it's been a full day.
Yeah.
But it's been productive. And I think I'm learning how to be okay with not being productive.
With not being okay. I thought that's what you were going to say.
With just not being okay, man.
Yeah.
And that's hard. So, yeah.
Why?
I'm good.
Why is it hard?
It's just like being productive. I like having my list done.
Yep.
I like going home and not having anything else to do.
Kristen and I were like diagnosing people with the Myers-Briggs. And there was like the one
I didn't read that. You sent a text. I didn't read it.
Yeah, but it was funny. Like it got you pretty good. And one of the things I think on there was like very efficient. And then the other one was like the weakness in that though is that you are very stubborn. And I was like, yeah, probably.
Wow, dude. Wow. Yeah, fair. Stubborn or can't chill.
It's true. You're not very good at relaxing.
No, I hate it with all my heart. So yeah, doing good. What are we talking about today?
We were talking about the idea of like what it looks like to lead when you're not in charge, which you said you stole that
from a book that I was forced to read. Did Craig Scroggins? Scroggins? Something Scrog. I could look it up. Hold up.
That's right. Anyway, shout out to Greg.
No, I think Craig Scroggins.
Did you read the book? I thought it was just a book title.
I had to read it when I was doing a residency at Rocky.
Gotcha.
There is a Craig Scoggins alive.
Why don't you search the book?
How to
lead when you're not in charge. What? Let me ask you this while you're searching.
Is this worth it?
It
is not Clay Scroggins.
What's his name?
I originally said Craig. It's Clay. I don't know. Hold up. I just looked up the name. Okay. How to lead. Sorry, I'm doing this one hand. Oh, it was Clay Scroggins. Clay.
Cool.
So, I read the book one time. I don't really remember what it's about. So, this is original. We just stole the title.
Yeah. So, if you want to read that book,
like.
we don't really know what's in it. We just are talking about the topic which he wrote about.
Yeah.
Fair enough. That's a good disclaimer.
We're not stealing anything.
Yeah.
Just the title.
Sorry.
We're just going to take.
Sorry, Craig.
Clay. Scroggins. Scrog. So, we were saying we've both been in these situations.
We have. But you came up with this idea.
Most people.
Like, Why is this like something you think's worth talking about? Just curious.
I don't know. You had all this leadership stuff on our little note thing. I thought, how to lead when you're not in charge? Because, okay, here's actually why. I do have a why. Because I feel like there's a lot of people out there who maybe are discontent in the spot they're in, whether that be like work or in your church or and maybe you think rightly or wrongly that you should have more leadership.
Yep.
Right. Because there's obviously some of us or all of us at times that think that wrongly. But maybe it's true, like that you feel like you should have more responsibility. But how do you lead in the area you've been designated currently, like the role you've been designated currently? Even like, let's just say like a church member, how do you, I don't know if lead is the right word, but how do you
I think so.
Influence maybe?
I think play
in
your
a healthy
part.
way, play your part.
If you want to use that language, I don't know.
So yeah, I just feel like that's most people in their lives. I think unless you're probably like the president, which he still reports to people, you're going to be reporting to somebody.
God.
Yeah, everybody is in a submission authority relationship. So yeah, how do you lead? How do you influence when you're not in charge?
I think like the first disclaimer I would say here is, it is probably one of the biggest leadership lessons I've learned is it's really easy to be critical of your leaders.
For sure.
I know that's not our heart here, but I just want to disclaimer that because it's like, it's worth, if you're feeling that way, it's worth, it's worth kind of sifting through is like, is this just me like being selfish and critical, or is this like actually maybe something that the Lord could even, I think, put on your heart at some points? So,
well, I would say like before I started leading in Reach, like I pretty much every church I'd go to or every whatever I go to, they could do that better. That would be like, even when I remember being like 18 and walking into church going like, I could lead this crap
so much better.
And then I get into a leadership position. It's like, oh my gosh, like one thing went well, praise God.
Well, and it's, I'd say like, there's just so much behind the scenes things that happen in leadership. And usually when we're critical of leaders, we see about 5% of like what they're at, like what actually went into them making that decision or doing the things they did the certain way they did, or
and that's
like
such a selfish view of leadership too, in the sense that like there's likely not a leader out there may be in some church or some ministry somewhere who's doing every single thing, and anywhere you involve other people, it's not going to be the way any one person wants it. Like there's always leadership delegated or leadership shared, like elders, right? Like there's multiple elders. And so it's never going to be the way that this one person visualizes it like completely. And so for you to think that, if I just got in there, then everything would be boom, 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 perfect. Like, and it's like, no, you might work 5-10 years to accomplish one of your ideals in that group, because it's not just you.
And you might even fix the things that you think might need fixed, but
it'd be worse.
Well, maybe it's better in those sense. Like maybe it is better there in those like places, but then like, because you were so hyper focused on these certain situations, like you kind of take for granted of like the foundation that was built with other people, or, know what I mean?
Yep.
So anyway, so I guess that's not really like necessarily what we're talking about. I just think it's worth disclaiming because same thing, like what you're experiencing, especially as a young guy, it was so easy for me to be critical. And actually what that mostly did was just take me away. I think it was like in some ways, like, if you want to say like Satan's way of like just getting me so focused on that I could do it better that I wasn't focused on God. It was like a way of like turning things to about myself.
For sure.
Still, it's like a selfish pride thing. So anyway, all that being said,
so
that's my one disclaimer.
No, I think that's really important, because I think there's like a heart there that's like, there's two different approaches, and the one that I think we were wanting to talk about is like a positive approach of like, hey, I feel like God has gifted me in these ways to be able to lead, but I don't have like a formal office or something yet, and not like office, like a physical space, but like been designated a role. as a leader. And so what do I do in the meantime? Because I know a lot of people like that, like who have certain gifts or abilities or character, which we'd say is the most important.
I've been there even in the last couple of years, multiple times.
So what do you do in the meantime? How do you, at the same time, not undercut the current leadership, like support them, hold them up, but attempt to try and walk in some of those ways that you've been gifted?
Well, other thing I think is worth mentioning for people who maybe don't know, like what you and I do. I am an associate pastor, so I think naturally with that title, like that kind of comes with this territory a little bit. And you kind of were, you're the leader, I guess. The director?
The technical term is director. Yeah.
Director of the college ministry. But before you were the director, you worked with me, and that's how we became.
I was an intern.
That was the making of the Boiz.
Yep. It was director and intern boy.
Yeah.
Boy.
That's what I called you.
Actually, no, originally it was Abide with the ladies with Kristen and Cass.
That was our first podcast.
First podcast name. Brutal name.
What did you want to call it again?
Breadth.
Yeah.
I think from Ephesians.
Yeah.
Because it's Ephesians 2.
What?
Breadth. Oh, how sick would that be? Welcome to Breadth.
I don't think anyone would join or listen.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what I am saying is that so my job currently is a lot more of this, where you probably in the past have experienced a lot. So actually, first thing, what was your question going? Because I just wanted to give some context of our ministry, because I think it can just be so different in different situations.
Yeah. I think the question was like, how do you walk out that role best when you feel like that's not the role that fits you? That wasn't the question I asked, but that's just kind of where it went. Sometimes I start a sentence without knowing where it's going to go. So how do you walk in that, like associate, how do you walk in that in the most healthy way you can?
Yeah. And I would say in some ways it's been hard, because I do feel like, in some ways I'm gifted, like in a way of like being an upfront leader. I'm not necessarily as good about being like a behind the scenes leader, if that makes sense. Like I'm not like a super organized guy or like admin guy to like help people like get organized to lead better sometimes. So, so with all of that being said, I think the first thing, and it kind of goes back to how we started the podcast, is do you trust where God has put you?
Yeah.
And be thankful for it. Because I think that's where it all starts for me. When I like kind of start to feel like, oh, well, maybe I want to do like something else, or I wish things were a little different or something like that. Like I said, the best way to kind of discern, like, well, is God putting this on your heart, or is this more of just a selfish thing? And usually the first step is just being thankful and trusting him that he's put me where I am. So I would say, obviously that's kind of like more theological, but that's where I would start. Where would you start in answering that question? So I think that there's like a lot of practical things I can think of, but I think like I'm kind of taking like the big view first and then moving towards like some of the practical things, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think context determines a lot. Like in terms of, because originally I was going to say, trust the person who God has put in that position.
Yeah.
But there's probably people out there who are not necessarily a part of a healthy situation. And so that would probably still apply, but it would be a little more complex and just like God's got the best person in the job for the job or whatever, like there's probably some pretty unhealthy situations where it's like that person is not good for this.
What would you say, like, for our listeners who would say like, how do I know if I'm in a healthy situation or unhealthy? Is there something that comes to mind?
I guess I'm thinking like abusive leadership.
Okay.
Like we were talking to somebody a few weeks ago who was a part of a church that they ended up leaving. This isn't a church in Durango. This is a church elsewhere, but they ended up leaving a church, but they were there for like a few years and just continually submitted to like this really, really abusive leadership where like it was some crazy stuff where the guy, there would be like sins that there'd be elders struggling with. And the head pastor would like go tell the entire church in a sermon without telling the elder beforehand or anything like that, or the family, and like just like all this crazy stuff. They ended up leaving. And so I guess that's the sort of situation we obviously usually think in ministry contexts. I think most of what we say could be applied elsewhere, but in ministry context, that's kind of what I'm thinking. And but that situation kind of aside, I think like trusting that God's got who he's got there for a reason and that he doesn't have you there for a reason, like at the time.
Or he has you there maybe for a reason, but not in that position.
Yeah. Not in that position that individual holds. Yeah. And I think trying to be really patient. And I also think trying to get a view, like a full view of what that individual is doing and trying to accomplish. Because I know like for me, like beforehand, right, before I took over Reach, it's like, oh, and if I were ever a leader in not even this ministry, but any ministry, these are the things I'd want to prioritize. And it's like, then you step into that, you're like, oh gosh, I can't even keep these 4 things held up,
right?
And focus on anything new or developing anything. I'm just trying to keep the ship like above water, you know, like, and so I'd say really trying to understand that individual so that you can come alongside them and actually help them would be a big one. And I'd also say, maybe this goes into more practical that you were talking about not having hit yet, but I would also say it's similar to our last podcast in terms of like, be where your feet are.
Yeah.
Like you lead really well in the area you've been designated. Like if you give it your all, and that's just been really hitting me lately of like, okay, I need to stop dreaming about the next thing. And like, where has God put me currently? What has he given to me currently to be a steward over? And how can I make that as great as possible?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really, really good way to lead, like whatever you've been put over, because you probably have people who are looking to you for leadership currently. You know, I'm just even thinking of people maybe who are helping with like a youth group or helping with like Young Life or anything like that in the stage they're in, or a college ministry or church. Like you've been given a chance to teach kids on Sunday or something. Like do that as good as you possibly can.
Yep.
And you're going to be a way better leader than if you just thought about, oh, I would be so good at being the lead pastor the whole time and didn't do what you were called to do right.
And that's what I mean, like in the way of like, whether this is theologically correct, that's how kind of Satan like distracted me from ever like helping people
doing
fully
what you're supposed to do
in some ways, because it takes away a percentage of like my strength and my thought. Sure. Like, because it's like, well, now I'm focused on almost in like a fantasy land of like, well, I would do better what I could do, instead of, like you said, being where you are.
Yeah. You miss out on the leadership you've already been given.
Yep.
It sucks for you and for everybody, you know, around you too. So.
Yeah. One thing I would say that I've learned being an associate pastor is like, I would say like one of my main roles, and Jimmy and I would say, and Jimmy does a great job at this. He's the head pastor here at this church, but Jimmy is really good about being like, no, like we're like equals in this. Like your voice is just as much as mine, you know, and which I think is really cool. But I would say my leadership, where I've had to grow, is my leadership is helping Jimmy lead, if that makes sense. Like I've had to learn to like, how do I encourage Jimmy a lot? Like how, and not to like blow smoke, but to like, to give him like, any sort of just encouragement or like, anything just to continue leading. I think that's a big thing I've learned is, because I think that we get a lot, I think leaders just in general get a lot of criticism, like we're talking about. Yeah. It's always like, here's how I would do it if I were in your position, like shoes and position. And it's like, if you don't have somebody who's like by you in that, it kind of gets to the point where you're like, why would I do this? Like,
sure. There's a lot of leaders who aren't like, this is not my first choice of what I want to do. Like, yeah. I just feel like
I found myself here to be. Yeah. And, you know, so I'd say that that's one thing I've learned is like, if there's places, and I think that that's a good place, like whether you're an associate pastor or whether you're a congregation member. And that is a place where I feel like this church has really blessed us. Is there like, there's people constantly encouraging us of like, hey, don't lose heart. Like even when we do things wrong, or like, maybe it's even a thing that they would have done differently. We do have some individuals who are like, hey, like keep your head up, learn from this, like, you know, or whatever, you know? So I don't know, that's something that comes to mind is like, how can you help those who are leading you lead you.
Well, that's probably like same for the leader too, is like helping other people lead as well, because like a Jimmy, right? A large part of what he's likely doing is equipping and helping the other leaders to lead, the other elders to lead, as well as like different ministry areas, but also like equipping and bringing up leaders for the future, and so that's probably a role, not just for the person who like in the second chair or however you want to say it, but also for the person in the first chair to help others lead as well. And so I think that's another thing, is just looking for opportunities to support the leader. I know for me, when there's people who will like come up and actually there's some Daniel the gunsmith.
Shout out
Daniel Clark. I don't even know if he does this or knows we do this.
Probably not,
but he will soon, because we're taking over, baby. We're back, baby. But he's like, he's always like, what can I do? Like, what do you need? Like, what? And it's just like, God, that is so awesome. And it also makes me, in the position I'm in currently, trust him a lot more and want to hand off a lot more leadership to him, you know, like, and obviously you could hear that and use that in a manipulative way of like, oh, if I want to lead more, then I just need to help more.
The only way to get like recognition from your leaders is by doing more.
And that's obviously not a servant's heart. That's not like that's like the joke we always make of like, oh, I'll go last for dinner because the last will be first. And it's like, wait, so you just want to be first? Like,
you're missing the whole
last
point
again. And so obviously that could be used in the wrong way. That could be used in the wrong way. But I think that's a really great way to lead, and to really like show others, what it looks like to be Christ-like as well. And that would probably honestly be a good part to wrap in, as well as like, what does Jesus consider like leadership in the kingdom? And how does that differ from a normal world thing, And it does seem that serving would characterize the like Christian leader much more than like a normal secular leader, you know?
Sure. What were some of the things like that you found when you were doing college ministry with me that you found were really important, of like maybe in that specific context, and then now being able to like look at it from a perspective of now you're leading that ministry. And I know it's kind of what you're talking about, but was there anything that like specifically kind of stuck out then of like what was helpful, of like maybe even helping me lead, or anything that comes to mind?
Well, kind of, I think, I don't know if it's really answering your question, but something I would say is like really enjoy the spot you've been delegated when you're not in that leadership position. Because like for me, I love like discipleship. I love one-on-one, like meeting with people in coffee shops and just talking about like how they're doing and all that. And I'm just not able to do that as much anymore. Like I still try to do it as much as possible. And specifically with our leadership team, that's where I try to do that most. But when that was my thing that was like delegated to me to like focus on, I could go so hard in that and just like focus on that. And again, back to the making that thing as good as you possibly can. Like that was awesome. And that was really enjoyable.
And one thing on that, I would say that helped me as a leader is I knew you were reliable. Like there was part of me that was like, you weren't just asking for things for like any sort of like position. Like in a way, at least maybe you were. I mean, who knows?
Look at me now.
I'm on top now.
Support raised, director.
But what I'm saying is like, you were also like, you were always like reliable in what I gave you. In some ways you were like, yeah, like, and I'll do it. And then I was able to trust you with a lot more. And even when it came then to like, hey, I've, God's called me into a new position. Will, like, you're going to take this over. There was like no worry. There was, because it was like the faithful in the little, or the faithful in the small things, faithful with little, or faithful with much.
Faithful with little. Faithfulness.
Faithful with much.
Jesus.
Anyway, but it was kind of that way of like, hey, I need you to meet up with like this one person. And it was like, cool. And it would be done. And then it was like, it could kind of build from there for me of like being, and like I said, and I could also see that you enjoyed it, which also didn't make me feel like it was like, it wasn't just something that needed to get done.
For sure.
It was also giving you life in ministry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There's a big difference there too, in terms of, I know when I look at leaders and like we don't really have like volunteers, but we have our, like I said, our lead team on Reach. But that makes a huge difference in like how much I trust somebody in terms of like, if it's like pulling out teeth for you to do something, or even to like come to our lead meetings, like, 6:30 in the morning, it's like, I don't know, like, I don't really want to delegate leadership to you. Like, cause this just seems like a task that you have to do instead of something like you're ready to do, and excited to do. And it's kind of the difference between serving and obligation, like you're just doing this cause it's an obligation rather than doing it cause it's something like you're joyfully doing. And so I think that makes kind of back to our former question of like, how do you lead when you don't have that official role, is to do the things you do like happily.
Yeah. And the last, I think last thing, maybe not, probably not, I was going to say about this is like, I think that there's also a thing I would encourage people to do is surrender their vision.
That's good.
Because I think that that's where I've also gotten like myself into troubles. Like I have a vision, and I think that that's kind of what we've been talking about is like, I have my vision, I have my way of doing things, and then it's not done that way. And then I've put these expectations in my mind of how things should be or should go. And when it doesn't go that way, then I'm like, hey, what the heck, you know? But I think one of the things I've had to learn is like, Jimmy, what's your vision for where we're going, what we're doing? And I think that just takes a lot of humility. In some ways it's like, it's hard,
for sure. Like, especially for visionaries.
Yeah. And so that's what I would say is like, I'd say just hold your vision of how you think things should be open-handedly. And I think that it also then like, that doesn't mean surrendering it in the sense of like everything you think is
convictions.
No, but it means like, hey, Jimmy's had different, even different visions of what I think small groups should look like. And now I would say I've been able to learn a lot from him, where now that original idea of what small groups here at the church, like what I thought they should look like, I've just learned so much from him. And now that would be a completely different vision, and now we're actually on the same vision, I would say.
Definitely.
But if I would have just held on to that vision, it would have been bad.
Well, and there's almost nothing like, that's one of the hardest things in leadership is when somebody comes in and has a different vision than you and is just like, this is the way it should be done.
Yeah. And
it's not even like a primary doctrine but it's just like no, this is just the way we're executing. This is completely wrong. Like there's nothing like that is so divisive, and it's so hard as a leader. And cause it's like, there's been this individual or individuals with like the elders, but a lot of times it seems like there's like a designated role to the lead pastor to like steer that direction, And
like the philosophy of ministry is usually like, obviously like the elders have a role in that, and they're helping discerning, but it is kind of Jimmy in some ways setting the vision of what he thinks that should look like.
I mean, I heard something a while back, but like in reference to the pulpit kind of guiding the ship, the pulpit sets it. And so whoever's kind of up there most is likely kind of guiding that thing and steering that thing, And so, but that would be another way. I think that goes back to learning like what your leader is trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish, so that you can come alongside them in that vision and be on the same page and help that ship, if you want to keep using that mentality, or like even take like a rowboat. So you can like row in the same direction and help that whole thing be accomplished, rather than row in a different direction and you go nowhere, you know, like, so I think that's really good. I took the last thoughts yesterday. You got any, or last week, you got any last thoughts to wrap us up?
Prayer. That's what I would say. And it's not necessarily something that I would say, like I'm great at in a lot of ways, but I would say pray for your leaders, pray for those who are leading you. And I would also say assume the best.
That's good.
Cause I think that's, important as well.
It's really good. Also, just so you know, we have to end at 30 minutes because of our software. So if you think we just end at 30 minutes because we want to, it's not true.
Yep. you heard us casting Kristen.
But we're also not angry. That sounded way saltier than I meant for it to sound. Okay, God bless. Later on.
See you guys.
Just say the boys.